Hey, listeners. I'm excited to have Shanna Hocking with us today. Shanna has become a trusted friend and ally of mine this year as we've been participating in a mastermind together. And she is also the founder of Hocking Leadership and has many, many avenues of research and a book, One Bold Move. And so she's going to talk with us about everything she does in the higher ed space and the thought leadership space. Shauna, I'm so excited to have you with us.
Julie, I'm so glad to be together with you today.
Well, tell me, how did this all get started? Like, how did you start on your journey to being a published author, an HBR contributor, a CEO, and founder?
Well, I started my journey in higher education fundraising when I was 18 years old. I was a freshman in college and very fortunately found what ended up being my dream career. I worked in the regional development office for 4 years at my alma mater, cold called my way to an internship at Duke University when they were in $1 billion campaign, which was one of the largest at the time. I knew I wanted to be like on a big stage and learn from the very best. And that internship set me on my career path. I then worked in public, private, and Ivy League universities, as well as academic medicine. I was focusing on raising six, seven, eight, and asking for nine-figure gifts. So it was really the transformational way that money and philanthropy could affect people and places. And on the journey in higher education fundraising, as a woman leader in particular, and then as a working mother, it was just a little bit harder than I felt like it needed to be. And I started writing and speaking on the side to support other people in their careers and got really energized by what I felt like I could do to support this profession I loved so much and others to be successful in it. And it eventually led me to write One Bold Move a Day. It was important for me to have it on a traditional business bookshelf, but tell the story of my development career, as well as research-backed insights about growing as a leader and a person. And then in 2022, when One Bold Move a Day came out, I launched my business, Hawking Leadership, full time, and has just been an incredible journey to work with more organizations and more leaders. As a fundraiser, we often think, oh, if we just raise more money, everything will be better. And what I really saw was if we can just figure out leadership in the advancement space, then we will raise more money and be better. And that's really where I focus my energy and time.
Oh, wow. That's such an interesting pivot. Like, if we just have to raise more money, like that kind of scarcity mindset, like money, 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 capitalism, capitalism, capitalism. But the pivot to what if we had more effective leadership that could drive the activities and efficiency and impact for the organization? Shauna, I'm curious, like there's opportunities in leadership everywhere, right? We know that, but in higher ed specifically, and as a newbie to higher ed, I'm kind of seeing it, very naively coming from the corporate space to the higher ed space. But I'm just curious, like, what are the unique leadership challenges that you see in higher ed specifically?
Well, I haven't worked in corporate, Julie, so I'll be curious for you as someone who understands both of these worlds. Higher education it has a storied tradition. Like each of these campuses, they've been around for, 100, 200 years. There's a lot of this is the way we've always done things, and it's helped us I would say up until the beginning of this year, right? Like the ability to rely on what has made us successful. And now we're definitely in the what got us here will not get us there mindset. And this is a huge shift. I thought that the pandemic was the biggest shift in how we do our work, how we relate to each other, how we care about our teams, how we show up as leaders. I mean, it was an incredible shift. And I thought it was the hardest. I led a team of 50 through the pandemic, and I thought, wow, this is the hardest it's ever been in our profession. And of course, now I would say that nope, this is actually the hardest it's ever been in our profession. And I think we have an opportunity right now to reevaluate how we've been doing things, relying on the things that make us so special and so strong, but being willing to be curious about what we might be able to do differently and better in order to achieve our goals.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, totally. Yeah, the pandemic, I mean, I've just heard the stories and, watched it in my business, how it just transitioned how we could teach content online and build rapport with students that were thousands of miles away from us. So yeah, we think it's, oh, phew, we got through that. And then here comes administration that really loves to focus on universities and funding. And those dollars that we used to get are not so certain anymore. So I get all of the unique challenges of this year. And I know at our university, we're facing a lot of budget cuts and just a lot of questioning of where we spend our money that traditionally I think went unsaid. And so that is that interesting time for leaders. I know you just did some research, and I'd love to hear more about what you're seeing current state, especially knowing, like looking at it from a women's leadership perspective, from a gendered perspective. What's the current state of women in higher ed?
So I started this research study, which eventually became the Bold Blueprint for Women Leaders in Advancement in January 2025. It was January 9th. I remember it because I'm actually, as I'm talking to you right now, looking at the post-it note that I wrote on the wall to myself in November when I had this idea, November 2024, when I had this idea to launch this study that had never really been done in this particular group. And and knowing when I started it is important to the story because January 9th, 2025 is a different time even than January 29th,
Mm,
2025. And so what I saw was an opportunity to better understand women chief advancement executives in higher education and academic medicine specifically. My team and I, we crunched the numbers on the US News and World Report top 100 universities. And we discovered that fewer than 35% of those universities have a woman chief advancement executive.
mm,
And, I have many people who say to me, but Shauna, we've made so much progress. And yes, I will always celebrate progress. And we have more work to do. The majority of our profession is women, right? The majority of the higher education profession for fundraising is women. And so understanding the unique challenges and unique opportunities for women leaders was a priority for me. And, we interviewed 49 different women chief advancement executives and really tried to understand what are their biggest challenges, where do they need more support, what are opportunities for presidents, deans, trustees to better recruit, retain, and support women in these roles. And, the number one finding from this was that the biggest barrier to success for women chief advancement executives is the structures and systems that are in place, which
mm,
were not built for them to be successful.
mhm. I see that so often on the corporate side too. I had this I remember this epiphany when I wrote Lead Like an Ally, a woman's journey through corporate America. And I was writing from just a collection, a treasure trove of stories that women had shared with me and I myself had experienced about we didn't build this. It wasn't built by us or for us. And so we find ourselves navigating these complex systems that just don't make sense for, 70% of women that are primary caregivers. It doesn't make sense for people that value flexibility and spending time with your family and doing things outside of work. All of these things aren't inherent in our structures, and I'm sure academia is no different. It's interesting, Shauna, from a systemic perspective. I actually think that's where the opportunity is right now with inclusion work, is because it's less sexy, it's less exciting, it's less news headliney, like, oh, they de-biased a system. Like that's not something that I think the naysayers are going to care about. But it's not this big training symposium event that causes a big splash, but doesn't have as much impact, in my opinion, as a trainer. So I'm curious from a systems perspective, like if you could wave a magic wand and fix some of these systems that weren't built for women and aren't working for women, where would you start?
Oh, well, first of all, I love a magic wand. I don't think we've talked about this before, but I love a magic wand moment, so I'm here for this. I also really want to highlight what you've said, which is the opportunity right now, though of course we recommend for there to be additional pipeline building programs and leadership training programs to put more women into these roles, that's not going to have the same level of significant and sustained outcome as changing the systems. And that's really where I'm focusing my time, energy, and investing really for Hawking leadership right now. Engaging the right people in the right dialogues to say, hey, here's some things we're noticing. Let's talk about what it even looks like to be at your table, for a university president's table. And I mean this both literally and figuratively. Do you create space for women at your table to be able to share their ideas? What is happening when you're not at the table? What I often see is like there's the meeting and then there's like the hallway conversation or the golf conversation or the whiskey conversation where women can equally participate in all of those, but they're not necessarily thought of to be in those. And so just really having the dialogue of, did you even notice this? Because I don't think it's intentional. I don't think people are
Mhm.
setting out to do this. It's that we have to be able to get curious and have a conversation and then say, okay, this is our way in. This is how we're going to make meaningful progress. We're not going to solve everything with this, but this is today's meaningful progress. And that's why I really am focusing on this. We're not going to blow up and change a bunch of systems that have been around for millions of years. What we can do is start to make incremental, meaningful, intentional progress on changing these structures
Mhm.
and systems.
Yeah. Yeah, it really is a simple pause. Who's in the room where decisions are made? Who's not? Whose ideas are heard? Whose ideas are not? Who interrupts? Who does not? I mean, if you just go through kind of this little checklist in your mind, you're probably going to find some gaps. And if you don't, you're probably not being honest or you've worked really darn hard to focus on this because what I love about this approach is it's not blowing up these structures. I think sometimes our work gets misunderstood. Like we just want to like throw everything away because parts of it aren't working. I don't see that as a possibility, let alone what we're really arguing for a solution is to be really mindful about acts of inclusion and being really intentional and consistent with those acts of inclusion. And Sean, we're not getting as much research as we did with gender in the workplace, but I will say, most of the studies, McKinsey and I know Joan C. Williams research and some other ones about women in the workplace, it's gender bias. Like it's those biases that impact us so often, often unconscious and subtle. So I'm curious, did you discover any of that in your research? Like what are some of the behaviors or other things that get in the way?
Yeah, well, what I value so much about the way, Julie, that you and I are approaching this is we are honoring the what's already good, and then we're bringing to light how we can do things better. Because I think that things have changed, but we need to make them more obvious and more present when they haven't. So, the question about gender bias in our research was really interesting. I had expected people to say more, in the respondents to say more, that they felt a distinct gender bias. And there are some certain examples of it. One chief advancement executive talked about how she made a donor visit reservation, or, she made a donor visit arrangement at the country club where women are not allowed. She did that for her
Oh
president. She
dear.
set that up, right? So we have some very clear examples from our interviews and conversations, but it wasn't what I guess I heard was that barriers have become different. Like the gender bias has become different for women. It's less obvious, but it's still present. And I think that was surprising to me because I expected it to be more. But then again, you have this example which is really, really obvious. So it's obvious, but there's an in between. I think that we're seeing where some people are feeling it more acutely than others. And I
Hmm.
wonder if that also depends on the type of institution, where they are regionally in the country.
Hmm.
Right? There's other factors I think that are at play.
Red state, blue state, sorts
I
of
mean,
things.
there's just so many. I mean, this is where the context of what we're in matters so much.
It does. It does. Yeah, it's interesting. I have a hypothesis about that one is sometimes when we're swimming in the water, we don't know we're in the water. And I'm just
Mm.
wondering if women, especially near the longevity, when you go into academia, you usually are a lifer. We were talking about you're in, you're in group and like it's your thing. There's not as many switchers like me, but I wonder if you've just been swimming in that water for so long that you don't question, like, I'm not invited to, I can't go to the
Mm.
country club. Like, I'm not invited to go golfing. Like, these are just things that have happened for the last 20 years, especially as you make it to the executive level. We don't think to question it, especially when like egregious acts of sexism and misogyny are on display every day. It's like, oh, well, it's not that bad, right? I can
Yeah.
handle not being included or being interrupted a lot.
Well, I do think this woman thought this was bad. But the other part that you're talking about with being on the in group is why I feel uniquely called to do this work right now,
Mhm.
because I love higher ed. I love higher ed fundraising. I truly believe it is the best profession in the world. I'm not pointing fingers from the outside to say, here's what we need to change. I grew up in this field. I know what it's like to be in these roles, and I believe we can be even stronger and better. And I'm hopeful that that does create the opportunity for the kind of progress that we'd all like to see.
Yeah, I love the optimism. Well, in the spirit of that, if there was one finding from the research that you would wish every higher ed leader would have access to or know so that they could do better, what would be one of the findings that you'd really want to highlight?
Uh, I would probably say that it's about onboarding. Over 70% of the women chief advancement executives reported not having any formal onboarding support. And we defined formal onboarding as professional development, executive coaching, or leadership training during their transition into the role. And this was particularly true if they'd come internally to be promoted, though we do know from our research that the majority of the women had to leave in order to get promoted into this kind of role. But this created lasting stress that went well beyond their first 6 to 12 months in the role and contributed to how they felt about the organization and their work outcomes. And this feels like something we could solve with a little bit of intention and effort. When organizations bring me on to work with these women chief advancement executives in years 0 to 3, that's really where they are able to create the infrastructure within their own part of the organization and at the president's table that are going to have lasting outcomes well beyond their tenure. And so this to me, more than 70% of these women, I think that's what I want people to know.
Yeah. Oh, that's so interesting as somebody that just went through onboarding. I don't know if I call it onboarding. There were a lot of orientations.
It was something.
Right. So I think I would net out in your research as validating that finding. And luckily
Mhm.
I found a mentor that's just been like an amazing advocate for me that is explaining all of like the hidden rules behind higher ed.
That
There's so many things I'm like, it's interesting. That's different. And I don't know the
totally.
why behind it or the how I'm going to navigate that. And just things like my email signature, like no one told me where my desk was. I don't know. These
This,
types of
right?
things.
But you found a mentor, and I think, I mean, I'm sure that we both agree about the value of mentorship and sponsorship
Yeah.
in order to be able to thrive in a role. And there's so many unwritten rules, I think in higher ed in particular, but then you add being at a leadership table in a leadership role, and those unwritten rules feel like things you can't ask about anymore because you're expected to know. And that's just confounding all of this. And so, with a little bit of intention and effort, right? I'm not suggesting we have to like do things that are not attainable with everything else that's on our plate. I,
Right.
I think I think it's possible.
Yeah. I would argue it's an opportunity for allyship for sure. And having a mentor, having a sponsor, an advocate, someone that challenges you, that gives you feedback, like all of those things are really important, especially in that ramp up period, as being a new leader. Shauna, I could talk to you forever. And I'm so thankful I got to meet you this year as you've I saw you through the journey of building out the research in January and then publishing it and now traveling and sharing the research and launching retreats and all sorts of really great programming from the research that you found. So I'm thankful that you're supporting uh, the new industry I found myself in, and I'm really thankful for everything you're doing to help women in the workplace and beyond.
Oh, Julie, that is so kind. I do really feel so grateful that we were able to meet and connect and to learn from you on your journey. And you've built a really wonderful community of people who believe in something that is bigger than any one of us. And I'm just grateful to be part of that community with you.
Oh, that's very sweet of you to say. That means a lot to me, Shauna. Tell our listeners how they can follow your work. I know you're really active on LinkedIn. Where would you like to point people to get access to all of your great thought leadership?
Yes, well, I'd love to continue the conversation on LinkedIn. I'm super active there, Shanna Hocking, and also my website, Hocking Leadership, and One Bold Move a Day is available in any bookstore where you like to read your books.